All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to tackle a question that seems, well, it seems really simple at first, but the answer, you'll see, has these massive consequences that stretch through history, philosophy, and right into our own minds. It's all about the ethics of killing.
So let's just dive right in with a classic thought experiment. The question is pretty straightforward, and it's designed to hit you right in your moral gut.
And for most of us, the answer is just instant. It's a yes. Of course you would, right? It feels less like a choice and more like a moral obligation to prevent a catastrophe you know is coming.
Okay, but, and this is a big but, that powerful gut reaction, that easy yes, it's actually the doorway to a much, much bigger and honestly more dangerous conversation. We have to push past that initial feeling and really think through what it would mean to make this an actual moral rule. So first, let's explore that intuition. Why does that yes feel so right, so necessary? What's the powerful logic driving us to that conclusion?
I mean, you look at these cases, right? The logic feels like simple math. If one person's actions are going to lead to the deaths of millions, then taking out that one person feels, well, it feels like a preventative measure. It's less about murder and more like surgically removing a cancer from the body of society before it can spread. It almost feels like a moral duty.
But here's the thing. Gut feelings, as powerful as they are, can be all over the place. A real ethical system can't just be built on what feels right in a really extreme black and white case. It has to be stable enough to work in the messy, gray, complicated real world.
And that leads us to maybe the biggest problem with this whole idea. If we say it's okay to kill evil people, who exactly gets to decide who's evil? Let's take a look at history. The French Revolution is a perfect and pretty terrifying example. It started out with the clear target, right? The evil was the corrupt aristocracy. But then, look what happened. That definition started to stretch. Soon, it included political rivals. Then, former allies you couldn't trust anymore. And by the end, it was anyone who just wasn't revolutionary enough. The category of evil became a weapon. And this is the real danger, right here. The power to define evil becomes the power to destroy. Once you hand someone that weapon, the ability to label an entire group as worthy of death, you're giving them a power that history shows us is almost always abused.
Okay, so this whole thing sets up a major clash between two big ways of thinking about ethics. It's a showdown between focusing on the result versus focusing on the rule.
So here it is, the ultimate stress test for any ethical system. It forces you to choose. Do you break a fundamental rule, do not kill, to get a really good outcome, saving thousands of lives? There is no easy out on this one. So here's how that breaks down. On one side, you've got consequentialist ethics. It's all about the outcome, the results. If killing one person saves 1,000, well, the math works out. The ends justify the means. But on the other side, you have rule-based ethics, and for them, it's all about the action itself. Some things, like killing, are just wrong, period. And you don't get to break that rule, no matter how good the reason seems, because the moment you do, the rules themselves start to crumble. All right, let's pull this out of the philosophy classroom and into the real world, because this is where it gets really scary. When we look at human psychology and how states use this power. To get regular people to do horrific things, you first have to change how they see their victims. In Rwanda in 1994, this was done with brutal efficiency, mostly over the radio. And they did it with one word, one single word. They called the Tutsi people cockroaches. Now, just think about the power of that. That's not just an insult. It's a recategorization. It's a psychological tool to strip away their humanity. You're not killing a person anymore. You're just getting rid of a pest, an infestation.
And that's the trap. That is the switch that flips in our brains that makes things like genocide possible. Empathy, our natural barrier to hurting other people, just shuts down. It's gone. And killing no longer feels like murder. It feels like cleaning. It feels like a necessary, even virtuous job.
Now, most modern societies do allow the state to kill, but, and this is a huge but, that power is supposed to be wrapped in layers and layers of rules. Due process, evidence, legal standards, accountability, these are the guardrails. They're what's supposed to stop that awesome power from going completely off the rails. And without those structures, without those rules, the whole thing falls apart. If an individual acts on their own definition of justice, we call it vigilantism. But if the state ignores its own laws to kill people, that isn't justice, that's tyranny. The principle is exactly the same. Unchecked power to kill is always illegitimate. So,
Where does this all lead? All of these different threads, from history, philosophy, and psychology, they all point toward a final and, frankly, pretty unsettling conclusion.
This phrase right here, enemy of the state, is the perfect example of this entire problem in action. It's what authoritarian regimes, like Stalin's Soviet Union, used. You take someone who just disagrees with you politically, you label them an evil saboteur, and suddenly, executing them seems totally logical. It's justified.
So here's the really tough takeaway. The idea of killing evil people, it's a trap. It promises a simple, satisfying solution to a very complex problem. But what it really creates is a moral system that's just fundamentally unstable. It can't support itself. Because the definition of evil is always up for grabs, and it inevitably, historically, expands to consume more and more people.
And that leaves us with this final thought. Look, nobody's arguing that evil doesn't exist. Of course it does. But the true measure of a just society isn't its willingness to kill monsters. It's the strength of the rules it builds to prevent itself from becoming a monster. It's about holding on to our principles, especially when every instinct is screaming at us to just let them go.